I'll take some questions. I see one here that says, can you repeat the part when I said just like when? Is that a part of the NAC, the Notice, Accept, Choose Again exercise to go deeper and find a feeling memory? Yeah, so just like when is about the idea that we're not upset for the reason we think. And going back to Dr. Daniel Siegel's ideas, the environment creates the mind, and then the mind creates the environment. And so checking to see if this feeling is from an earlier time in your life. So if somebody's sitting there feeling misunderstood and alone, and they're talking about something that happened at work and they weren't invited to the party, and they're 50 years old, they weren't invited, and this is how I'm feeling now, we would work that. And then because of my training in hypnosis and then just being around this consciousness work, you're still on a superficial level, very helpful to work this. Now ask the question, and how old is this? Or just like when? And see what pops up into the subconscious. The key is you're tracing back the feeling. You're not tracing back the narrative, the story. Remember, when you believe in the story, you make it real. We're not tracing back just like when were you left out by friends and you weren't invited to a party like at work. That's not what we're just like when. The feeling. So what does it feel like? I feel like I don't belong. Okay, just like when? How old is that? What's one of your first earliest memories where that feeling began, where you felt like you did not belong? And then some memory is going to come up that doesn't make any sense. You're like, I'm not sharing this. It's stupid. That's usually a good one. It feels stupid. It usually ends up usually being a good one. So that's what I mean by just like when is what's happening now is just a new story, new environment from an old program. So again, if you want to go into the conscious work, what people are suggesting is we as humanity have this program, and what's happening in the leadership around the world, not just in the United States, and what's happening with the economy and COVID, it's just another wake-up call. Like we feel lack, not enough, we're helpless. So it's just the environment looks different. The story's new story, new characters, but the programs out there running back in England 1,000 years ago, or back in China 2,000 years ago, same program. So that's the idea, is not to get caught up in the narrative, not to get caught up in the story, and find out how old is that feeling, that vibration. Because the idea is your external environment's a reflection of your internal environment. So if you keep getting into relationships with people where this happens, where this feeling comes up, you're part of the cause because of your program. You unconsciously choose these people or choose these workmates or choose these clients, right? And if you change your vibration, you will see and make different choices, different behaviors. So a lot of this stuff is happening unconsciously. You're not even aware of it's happening to you. And so that's why we say just like when, to see if there's an old wounding of your childhood. Now, I'll share with you somebody I was working with where she doesn't have a memory from like 5 or onward, not very much of her childhood. And she keeps having this memory come up, but lots of anxiety around it. And we just work it and never went further. And again, based on my training, I never plant memories. I don't dig. Like, it's not like I got to find it. There's got to be there. I just ask. And so I just asked again, just like when. And then all of a sudden, all this memory flooded back that she had no memory of. I didn't plant it. She just all of a sudden had this memory of a terrible experience where police had to come, and she was like 4 years old. And, you know, it was earth-shattering for you to have this memory and then have to talk to people around it and do her healing around it. But she had a full-on memory and was able to have a relationship with that memory and heal that memory. So I think, again, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. So I like to think, and I'm curious. So what I'm thinking is happening, and I'm sharing this from my perspective. I'm like, why was it that everything was pretty awesome in my life, and then around my 40s, all of a sudden I got some anxiety and some weird things started happening. And now I'm understanding the subconscious better and conscious work. in my head, how I make sense of it is the environment creates the mind and the mind creates the environment. So it's kind of like everything's being pushed down because you're not capable of dealing with it as a childhood. It's protecting you. And then you come to an age at around 40, and then it's like, okay, now you got to deal with your shit. And now I can't do anything to ignore it. It keeps showing up in my face. I can't get away from it. I have to do my work. I have to be conscious. I have to heal my mind because it's relentless. Before 40, I could deal with it. And after 40, and all my clients, it's like it all happens like in their 35, 40 age group. So it's kind of like that balloon is like, yeah, now you're old enough, you're going to deal with your stuff. We've packed it away for a while. Now you're going to deal with it. So that's what I think happens is and I think about when I do my functional medicine, the adrenal burnout, my clients, when I did my training with Dan Kalish, the adrenal program, there's three main reasons for the adrenal fatigue, all related to inflammation. Emotions, number one, diet, number two, and then hidden inflammation, number three. Emotion, number one, the number one cause. One of the main things he's noticed in his practice, financial disaster in your family, death of a loved one when you're young, divorced parents, sexual abuse, alcoholic parents. So you can deal with this, but if you had an alcoholic or drug parent, yeah, you're probably going to benefit from NAC. If you were sexually or physically abused, you're probably going to benefit from NAC. I work in reproductive health, and I predominantly see women. And my biggest eye-opener was, I would say most women I see have been sexually abused. I'm amazed. I would not have known that. But so if you're female and you're part of that culture, you probably could benefit from the NAC because there's some type of wounding from teenage, earlier ages, unfortunately. And men have had their crap too, what they've had to go through. So it's just, I just think we have to, again, I'm talking to myself here, but sharing with you, no time to blame. I just got to go in and heal. And so I just do my work. And that's what the NAC is for. And most things aren't from today. Most things I subscribe to at this point in my life are probably things that happened earlier in my life. And there's a theme, a feeling, a program, a belief I'm running from something that happened. And now that theme shows up in my life. It looks different stories, different characters. But if I go into what that makes me feel, it's the same thing that started a long time ago. Okay, so that's my point I'm making with the NAC. Just like when, usually it's not related to what's happening now. We're being fooled that we think it's about what's happening now. It's probably from something earlier. Did that answer that question? Is there any follow-up questions to that? So is it not necessarily something that has happened as a child, but you're parenting your child? I'm parenting my child because it happened as a child. So there's two parts to this question. So Karen, let me think about this for a minute. When I feel the anxiety, I'm aware now that it's coming from my childhood. So I go in to parent my little guy. However, I've done the work to know that I have some memories and can think of why I would have this. And so now it just makes sense when it happens, I just come alongside my guy and just say, hey, what's going on? So I think your question is, do you have to have a memory of an injury with a child to come along your child? If you're asking that, I would say, no, you don't. For example, I was in a meeting related to business, and I was quite nervous about it and intimidated by one of the characters. And then I did some work around it and realized it's like a childhood thing. And so I just got to make sure I stay grown up there when I'm in this meeting, because when the fear comes up and all that, I'm reverted. I'm regressing now. I'm no longer a grown up. I'm a kid and he's the adult. And so there's this inferior relationship and it puts me in an uncomfortable, fearful position. And so as I sat down, all of a sudden the fear came up, and in my mind's eye, I said, hey, little buddy, if you want, you can stand behind me and hold my hand. And so I held my little guy's hand. I could see myself as a young kid, and just in my mind, I got this. And then I sat down as an adult to this adult. So I was present, notice, accept, choose again. I became present that I'm grown up Lauren having a talk with this guy, which does not create any intimidation or fear. But when the fear intimidation came up, I realized this is my inner child, my little guy that's being intimidated. And grown up Lauren said, I got this. And so that's how I'm hacking my mind when I'm in these situations. Because why would 50-year-old Lauren be intimidated by this guy, right? Makes no sense, but yet I was. But little Lauren might be. So I get your feelings, I get what's going on. I got this. So that's does that answer that question? You can come alongside your child.
Kind of, but that's also something that you can still relate to as a child, being around adults and being in that situation. But and I can't remember what it was, but before the break, excuse me, you gave an example. And I was just trying to relate how, if you didn't have any of that kind of experience, but you're feeling these feelings, is it something that you're just not remembering? Or is it something that you, as an adult, just parent your child as though it were your own child experience? Like, say if it was my daughter experiencing it and me as a parent, how I would help her, but do it as an inner child instead.
Can you just clarify? So, because you're talking about you have a child, like you're talking about your child, not your inner child, but your child.
Right. But I was just, because if you can't relate, like there was an example you gave before the break and I couldn't relate it back to my own. So I was asking, do you have to have the experience as a child in order to be able to acknowledge that? Or can you, as a parent your inner child, even though you haven't gone through those specific experiences?
I would say the answer is both. And so if there's no memory of it, it's a little bit of a challenge to reparent the kid because there's no memory of it, right? And so if something's coming up as a feeling and you want to inner child work it, saying, hey, I wonder how old this is, you can just ask your little child saying, hey, what's going on? And see what comes up. Because if you're feeling anxious, for example, you could just say, hey, what's going on? And see what comes up, right? And start to have a conversation with her. You can also just come along your child. So, we always do our work when we're suffering. But just like if you're a parent and you have children, I know I've done this, especially when they're younger, on a daily basis, a couple of times a day, I would say, hey, Oliver, yeah? Have I told you today that I love you? Yeah, like 10 times. Well, I just want to tell you again, I love you, right? So you can come along your child and just say, hey, little guy, or you call yours, hey, Angel, hey, sweetheart, hey, little Carolyn, whatever you call her, right? Just want to say I'm thinking about you and I love you. I'm here for you. I'm always beside you. 2 seconds, and now you're on your day, right? So you don't have to wait for you to be in a crisis to reparent your kid. You can just tap into the little child every once in a while that you have a memory of yourself and just keep coming back saying, I love you. I'm always here for you. I'm so glad you're born, and then move on. If you're struggling and you're going into, I have a feeling, and then accepting what is. So I notice I'm being triggered. So you get curious. And so what's going on here? And it could be as you get to work, do these tools, you may start to have a memory or two where you realize, geez, a lot of this stuff comes from this age. So you just habitually go into reparent this little kid. Or you may be having an issue at work and it brings up an emotion and you're working it with the whole brain posture and you're working it. And then you choose how you want to feel. And then you decide, I want to explore more. So you get into that memory again, what happened at work and that feeling. And then you ask yourself, how old is this? Just like when? And see if a memory pops up. I'm not a fan of looking for trouble, just to clarify that part, where some people on your table is like, you have to have had something bad happen to you at 4. I do believe or subscribe to the fact that that woman that didn't get her popsicle, nothing bad happened to her. She just didn't get her popsicle because she didn't eat her dinner. That was the deal. But she internalized it differently. So it doesn't have to be what we would judge a horrible experience. Although the people I see, they've had very horrible childhood experiences. Some people, they're embarrassed to tell you because somebody did this and this is how they feel. But as a child, they're in theta and they just take it that way. Like when parents get divorced, the children, I'm not the therapist again, just telling you from the workshops I go to, it seems like when you dig in, the children tend to blame themselves that they're not either lovable, otherwise they would have stayed together, or they didn't fix it. If they could only fixed it, they would have stayed together. And they have this need to always please people because they'll stay together. They don't want conflict. Like it seems like that action of parents separating, the children can't get it, so they can only take it personally. And again, I'm not a counselor, not a therapist, so I can't have a discussion whether it's right or wrong. I'm just sharing with you from the workshops and the reading is it seems like a lot of our wounding is early, and then we just keep reliving it, but in different themes, and recreating it in different themes. And the idea is if you heal that vibration, if you heal that wound in yourself, then you don't keep recreating in your external environment. This is why the inner child work is so powerful. So if you want your environment to change, you change. And a lot of that change can happen when you do subconscious work, belief change work, using the inner child modality.
Thank you.
Okay. Does the inner child emotional experience ease up? Yes, as the work is being done. Yes. It definitely gets easier. There's that expression, the longer you do it, the easier it becomes. The easier it becomes, the longer you do it. Yeah. You become awake, and it becomes I would call it an enjoyable process, or a positive process at least. At the conscious work, like the Gila Golub work that I started back in 2014, observing people that come and go, people are in crisis, they're suffering, so they start this work. They benefit after a month or a year, and then they leave. And then 3 years later, they come back, and they think it's a whole new story. But for all of us that have been listening to them for the last 3 or 4 years, the story looks different, but the feelings are no different. So it's so obvious to us what's going on. And I made a choice back in 2016-ish, because I did Gila stuff, felt great, pulled back, and then I didn't feel so great and went back. I realized I don't want to ever have to feel that lousy again and have that experience. So I'm going to constantly do my work, even when I feel good. We're drawn to the work when we're suffering. But I think of like a professional athlete, and what came to my mind is Michael Jordan. He won MVPs, he won NBA championships, but he still seemed to work harder in practice than any of his teammates. And I think it's because he wanted to maintain that level of excellence, and maybe he can even get better. And so I continue to do my work because maybe I can maintain this level of consciousness and peace and joy in my life, and maybe I can make it even stronger. So most people, and my clients are the same. They come, they start to feel better, and then they stop doing the tools and they leave. And then 2 years later, they're almost back at square one. So this is something you'll never stop doing. And it also gets easier. You just got to clear this. Any other questions, Lorianne? Please ask them if I missed anything. So let's talk about EFT as another accepting what is tool. And as I mentioned, there's many more that we can add to this list down the road. When I learned EFT way back in the early 2000s, maybe 2004 or 5, somewhere around there, shortly after he started teaching and developing it, I learned it from somebody in Surrey, BC. Somebody learned it from the founder, Craig. And I felt silly doing it on patients. A fun story. I was treating this woman with acupuncture. She had some foot ankle issues, and I just wasn't able to get results with her. And she was in for her last treatment, and I decided to offer EFT to her. I felt silly. So I couldn't even call it EFT or emotional freedom technique. I said, can I try this Ooga Booga technique? I had to dismiss it a bit so she didn't judge me as a quack. And so I asked her if she was interested in it. And we just started doing tapping on her ankle. We're going to explain what this technique is in a minute. And then she got into the emotion that was connected to the ankle. She shared how she was estranged from her brother. She had tears. We tap. She had great resolution. And she walked out of the office. Like, she could not walk properly. And that was my first cool miracle with this brain stuff, pretty unbelievable. A year ago, I was thinking about one of our clients that had sciatica. And with sciatica, acupuncture is pretty good with it, especially if it's unilateral, one-sided. 1 to 3 treatments were pretty good with sciatica in most cases. And we couldn't touch it. She'd get a little bit of an hour or two, and then it would come right back. We used our lasers. She went for chiro. She went for massage. She was doing everything, her painkillers. And she had this for about 10 days to 2 weeks, and she was not getting any resolution to her sciatica. She having to stay in bed all the time. So I saw her checking out, and I knew her well, and I said, hey, we've tried everything. Can I do one more thing with you? And I know her from also Gila Golub's work, so I know she's open to the subconscious work. So I do an EFT session with her. We start on her back pain, her sciatica. We move into, again, where is this coming from? So she's separated, so it gets into this, her emotions around separation, moves into she's estranged from her kids in the separation. And then, just like when, it moves into her childhood, all the stuff that went on in her childhood. That's what we end up working on. So we go from tapping on pain to tapping on emotions. She walked out of here and that sciatica never came back. Okay? So there's that mind-body connection. Now there's some research on this. So let's talk about EFT. Now I'm comfortable talking about it. I won't even call it Ooga Booga. It's emotional freedom technique. And so Peta Stapleton has written a book, and she did some research on eating disorders and using EFT, the tapping technique. And in her research, when they looked at people with food cravings and eating disorders, they also did some biomarker measurements. So they looked at things that weren't just subjective, like, oh, I don't crave chocolate anymore. They looked to see biological changes. And so when they did this tapping technique, they noticed that the amygdala calmed down. That's part of that reptilian brain where you go into high beta, sympathetic, narrow focus, fight or flight. So they saw that calm down. They also noticed changes in hippocampus. Well, that's your memory area. So part of that perception, your memory. So they saw that change. Remember, 50% of what you think is made up. So the hippocampus shifted. Cortisol levels changed. So a lot of people are familiar with cortisol, one of the hormones that can be involved when you're under stress. And they saw a change in gene expression. So they saw a change on a DNA level from using this tapping technique. Now, they did this, and they did a comparison with this with cognitive behavior therapy and with EFT. And the EFT was done twice a week for about an hour at a time for 4 weeks. And the duration of sessions was much shorter. The results were very similar to cognitive behavior therapy, but at the fraction of treatment numbers and time. So it was a major cost savings, and it actually happened at a faster rate. A year after the study, when they did follow-up, many of the people in the study would say that I think it was an error that I was in the EFT study because I never really had a chocolate craving or whatever my craving was. Now, these people were all screened properly. They actually had a craving issue, an eating disorder issue. That's how come they got in the study. But the EFT and working on cravings, it's not about using willpower to not do something to change, to stop the craving. You actually have a new neural network. You have new programming done. And so the fact that they can't even identify as the person that had a craving, that's the change in hippocampus. Their memories change. They don't even identify as the person. That shows you how powerful this subconscious belief change modality, EFT, is, because they can't even identify as the person that wanted to eat chocolate. Now, a cute story around the EFT and chocolate. My wife is used to me doing some weird things. I've done toning, music. I do acupuncture, all the things I bring home, the toys. And she came into the kitchen and she saw me hovered over a box of chocolates I received. And she sees me holding a piece of chocolate under my nose as I'm tapping on my hand, and she can hear me mumbling something. And she goes, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing this tapping technique so I don't eat this chocolate." And she goes, "Oh, I can help you with that." And she picks up my chocolate and throws it all in the garbage. So that's one effective way to not eat your chocolate. Later on, a couple months later, we're at a movie and she gets popcorn, and I wanted to get into better shape. I want to fit into an outfit. This was before COVID, when we could go out and dress up and see people. And so I said, "I'm not going to have any popcorn. I want to fit into this suit." So I take her popcorn, 2 or 3 kernels, and I start tapping on it. And she goes, "Come on, just don't eat it." And I said, I don't want to use willpower. I actually want to not want the popcorn. So that's why I'm going to tap. And I tapped on the popcorn, and it stayed at an intense craving at a 10. I tap on it again. It stays at intense craving of 10. Third time 7, then 5. And then it literally went down to I did not want the popcorn. So I have used it for my patients, myself, for food cravings. You can use it for many different things. The research on it's been done on food cravings. They've done it on anxiety. They've done it on post-traumatic stress disorder. They've done it on anxiety for test taking in children. So there's quite a few studies that they have done on this technique. So let's explain the process and how this works as our last tool, and then we're going to call it a day. So basically, emotional freedom technique is using exposure therapy. So bringing up the issue, the fear, the concern, right? The emotion. Doing some cognitive restructuring. So accepting what is. So that's the cognitive restructuring. And somatic release, tapping on points. And through this exposure therapy, cognitive restructuring, and tapping, they see the amygdala calm, hippocampus change, cortisol levels go down, and gene expression change. So it is doing something on a cellular level. To benefit from EFT, you benefit most if you have a memory that you can connect to when you're doing the tapping. So if you just say I have anxiety, just saying even though I'm feeling anxious, I love and accept myself, you got to have a memory. Like, anxiety from what? What's the story? What's happening right now? And this is where we can regress it, just like when, but you can start off with today. What happened today? Why are you feeling anxious? So you work on what's happening now. You want to attach it to a memory, and you want to be in the feeling. Many of you have heard of neuroplasticity, that the brain can change, right? That's the neuroplasticity. And to make the change, though, we have to make the program vulnerable, which means you have to experience it. So I would say you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, because if you're going to change a program or an experience, it's important that you experience it, meaning make it vulnerable. That's the exposure therapy. So you got to get back into the feeling, back into the experience. If you're not experiencing it, then you're not going to get the benefit as much, because it hasn't been exposed properly. So I have seen people say, I've done EFT. I bet some of you here, I've done EFT, it didn't work. Well, I'm relentless. If we're going to do EFT as one of my tools, I make sure we have a memory, because having the memory helps elicit the feeling. Just like in gratitude, writing something you're grateful for helps elicit the feeling of gratitude. I'm after the feeling, but we're using the thinking to bring up the feeling. So we get the memory, the story, to bring up the feeling, and then I remind them to stay in the feeling. And they got to say with meaning and conviction. So basically, you're tapping on a point here, and I'm going to go over the points. You're going to get handouts for this. But you're doing the setup as exposure therapy. So let's say I'm feeling anxious. Even though I feel anxious about giving a public talk, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. You say it 3 times. Even though I feel anxious, I'm afraid I'm going to make a fool of myself, and I have this imposter syndrome, and it makes me feel anxious, I choose to love and accept all of me. Even though I feel anxious, I choose to love and accept how I feel, including feeling anxious. So this is you priming yourself to feel it. You're getting yourself feeling it. You're telling the story of why you're feeling anxious. So you're bringing up the memory, and then you go and tap the points. And while you're tapping the points, your eyes are closed because it's an inside experience, and you're focusing. You start off with the memory of, oh my God, I'm giving a talk and I feel like I'm not going to do a good job and I'm going to embarrass myself and nobody's going to like it and I'm not good enough. And that makes me feel anxious. And now you focus on the feelings while you tap each point gently with 2 fingers. And the points are the inner eyebrow point we start with, so bladder 2 for my acupuncture friends. Then the temple point, Tai Yang, on the outside of the eye is the next point. And you tap for 5 to 6 beats, okay? Then under the eye, just on the bone, center of the pupil, stomach 3. And then between the nose and the upper lip, the philtrum, do 26 for acupuncturists. And then Ren 24, just the chin point, just under the lip and above the chin. And then the collarbone point, kidney 27, basically take your hand, come across your chest and hit that whole part so you get everything. Nice and gentle there, kidney 27. Again, focusing on the emotion, staying focused, doing your best to keep the feeling there as strong. Now, as you do this, it may start to intensify, but then it goes down. And then tapping under the underarm, under the armpit, behind the breast tissue, spring 21. And then by way, do 20, the top of the head, okay? Now, when you've got an emotion, so let's say you're feeling anxious. I'm feeling really anxious about XYZ. Give it a number. So she calls it a SUDS, a subjective unit of distress. How strong can you feel this right now? Or if it's something from your past and you're thinking about when you're 7 years old, if it was happening now, as if it's happening now, be there now. Be 7 years old, be in the basement, be there with your cousin who's throwing the baseball at you and you're really scared, whatever it is. How strong is that feeling? And 0 to 10. 0, no charge, 10 to charge. So you just make a guess of the feeling. And then you bring it, even though I feel afraid, I deeply and completely accept myself. You say this 3 times. And then you go to the memory. I'm in the basement and you feel the fear. And then just focus on fear as you're tapping. Focusing on the fear as you're tapping each point. And you come through each point. And then at the end, you take a deep breath. And then you check in on that memory and see if there's a shift in the feeling. Was it 9 before? What's it now? And you keep tapping until you bring that feeling down to a 1 or a 0. So you keep doing this tapping technique until you get to a 0 or 1. Okay? And again, this is just a tool, a gimmick to get you to present moment. But again, it's a tool that's shown some cool changes, shifts in your biomarkers. Right? Shows you to get you into alpha, get you into present moment, get you resourced again. And again, seeing patients that have done this, it says it's silly, just seeing some profound effect on the table, something that you, if you're a clinician, you can teach your patients, they can do it themselves. So often I used to, for the acupuncturist, well, I needle them so I have access to their hand, one of their hands so I can do it. So, we can do unilateral points. But I make sure I have access to one hand without needle involvement. But whether you're using acupuncture or not, you just sit there and tap. You can do 2 points at once, just so you know. Obviously, the ones in the center of the body, you can only do one of those, but you can do 2 points at once if you can. And you're being in the feeling. And this is where you go into the bathtub and feel the sadness. So you want to feel it. And it may get a little intense, and then it usually shifts and goes down. And you could do this for a craving. Even though I crave chocolate, I set myself for the person who craves chocolate. And this is the technique. When it works, it doesn't work, or where you get the most benefit, I'm going to repeat this again. Because if even though I'm afraid, I deeply accept myself, even though I'm afraid, if you're not in the experience, you have not made it vulnerable. You have not exposed it. You are not working it. You are not making any change. So if somebody is coming to work with me and they don't want to go into the experience, or they choose to not go into the experience, they will not benefit from EFT because you're not in the experience. The key is to have the somatic technique done while you're in the experience. And what's cool is as you start to do this on yourself, you'll start, for me, it's this point's it. As soon as I tap this, I feel really good. But it's amazing, as I'm tapping this, I get a nice feeling along my body. So I just start, and then it's just like it's become so habituated for me that when I do tapping, there's such a shift in my body. It's so obvious for me now with tapping how I can make a shift for myself. With my clients, when I do it for somebody else, I used to tap for them. Because of COVID, I stand back, I have some distancing, they have their mask on, and I get them to do this. So you do this while I do it. So that's how we're going to finish today. You are going to do an EFT on something, okay? And we're going to play with I'm not good enough, because it's a common one that I see. So if you're feeling good enough, great, but let's just do it anyhow. So I want you to think of a time when you felt you just weren't good enough. Think of an experience you had, it could be recent, it could be old, where you just had this feeling that you're being judged and you just felt like you're not enough, you're not good enough. So find that time. And now close your eyes and just be there for this moment now, where you're just remembering this experience. Notice how old you are. Notice if you're inside or outside. What time of day is it? Just get your surroundings set. Notice your age. And now get in touch to that feeling of not good enough. Not good enough, not belonging. And give that feeling a number from 0 to 10. How strong can you remember it? How strong can you feel that memory now? 0, no charge, 10, really strong. And now that you have that number, now if you don't know where the points are, you're welcome to open your eyes a bit. A lot of people will at the beginning have their eyes closed, so their eyelids are slightly closed, so they look closed, but they can actually see me, okay? And you can see the screen. And so start tapping on the karate chop point, okay, on your head. Basically small intestine 3 for acupuncturists, but just the karate chop point. And think of that memory and repeat out loud, even though I feel like I'm not good enough and I just don't belong, I still deeply and completely love and accept myself. Repeat, continue, even though I feel like I don't belong, I feel like I'm not good enough, I choose to love and accept all of me. Really get into this feeling. Even though I don't feel like I belong, I'm not good enough, I choose to love and accept myself and how I feel, including feeling like I don't belong and I'm not good enough. Now go to your memory, be there as if it's happening now, and focus on this feeling of not belonging as you tap on the inner eye point. Just allow yourself to feel that not belonging. Notice where you feel it in your body. And now the temple point. So I just notice that feeling of not belonging and not being good enough. And now under the eye, just that little bony part, not good enough. And then under the nose, not belonging, not good enough. And then the chin, as best you can, focus on feeling not belonging, not good enough. Then the collarbone point, not belonging, not good enough. And then under the armpit, not belonging, not good enough. And then top of your head, not belonging, not good enough. And then stop the tapping and take a deep breath and release on the exhale. And then in traditional EFT, they would say, what number would you give that now? Right? If you go back and feel that. So check in on yourself. What number does it feel like? What was it before? Did it shift? And then I always ask, because I use multiple disciplines in my practice with the NAC. So it's not EFT they're getting, but multiple disciplines. So a little bit of regression. I would ask, did any other memory come up while we did this? Did any other memory while we were doing this? And I'm like, yeah. Tell me about it. And then we see if it's the same emotion or new emotion. And then we start tapping on that one. And then I asked them, did any other memories come up? And if they said, yeah, then we go to that memory and tap on that. So we see we're following it. If they say, no, I stay with that memory, I ask them, what's the strength of it now? And then they would tell me. And then I say, and how old is that feeling? So that's when I ask that question. When they stop jumping to memories, I want to know how old it is. Is there an older time? And then see if a memory comes up. My experience is that it's like dominoes. Usually there's 3+ memories. And when you have those, then they all kind of just start to drift. And so then we come back and check the other memories to see what the numbers are. But as we go back, like even though that was saying 8, the first one, it went down to 6, but another memory came up and we did this. Eventually, when we find a good memory and a good emotion and we work it, and we get that down to 1 and 0, when we check the other ones, they tend to stay low. They don't tend to go back up. So once you do a couple of them, you have that. And you can combine the NAC. So remember when I said you finish tapping, take a deep breath and exhale? Right then and there, you can do a surrender. I surrender feelings of not belonging and not good enough to the universe. So that could be how you end your EFT, right? Again, when I do one-on-one with my clients, we are moving in the NAC, it's a flow. And so they're usually getting a little Bankston healing with EFT, and then there's some inner child. And it just, I never know what I'm going to use, which makes what I do exciting because I never know what tool I'm going to pull out. They just kind of, they come out.
Lauren, we did have a question from one of the participants. They ask, how did you bring in the pain part for the client with sciatica?
How did I get into the emotions?
I think that's what they meant.
Yeah, I just asked, like, what are you feeling? Like, what's having sciatica? What's going on for you? So emotionally, how are you relating to the sciatica? How does it make you feel that you get the sciatica and it won't go away? So then they brought up some feelings they have. I can't remember, helpless, afraid, because she, all of a sudden she goes down you go down that rabbit hole of, I can't take care of myself. I'm going to be all alone. I'm going to die, and then, so whatever I don't have to know the stories, by the way, when I work with my clients. Again, I'm not a therapist or a counselor. I'm asking a few questions only for them to elicit stuff. And because when you believe in the story, you make it real, my job is, when I'm working with you, is to not make it real. And so I don't embellish or get too much into stories. I just want the story so I can use it to work your emotion. And other than that, I'm not doing any therapy. So I just asked her a few questions. She's got all this stuff going on. She's experiencing in her head, how does it make you feel? And she may give me 1 or 2 words. And I go, is there anything else in your life right now where you're feeling helpless? And then, and then she goes into her, I'm being divorced, I'm separated. Okay. And then we work that. And then I ask, did any of the memories come up while we did this? Yeah, well, I'm estranged from my kids. And this happened to me when I was a child, right? Or the woman with the ankle, I just ask, what does it represent? Or is there any feeling? How does it feel that you have this ankle and it's hurting you? What comes up for you that you can't resolve this? So it's just a normal conversation. So I'm pretty clear I'm not doing therapy. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze them. How does it make you feel? I'm just seeing if they're aware of a connection to the pain, or does the pain create, and it has to. I mean, everything you give it meaning. So what does it mean to you that your ankle hurts, right? I think it's a good point to talk about this because we're going to do the manifestation more tomorrow. Some people are afraid that we're tapping and they're thinking about negative stuff, that you're going to program all this negative stuff in my body. I don't want to do this. I want to only think positive thoughts. And some of you may be thinking this only because it's a common question I get in my clinic. And I understand where that question is coming from, because if you're constantly living in fear and you're constantly, if you're going to therapy and you constantly talk about how your dad was an alcoholic and he beat you, then you're just reliving that on a subconscious level. So you're just making that pathway that much stronger. And so in the hypnotherapy world, that's not how they want to do solution-focused counseling. They want to change the program. And so it's okay to bring up the program to make it vulnerable, but we don't leave you there with it, right? And when you work yourself, you don't leave yourself with it. You want to make it vulnerable so you can heal it. So you're taking up a relationship with it. So you're not at the effect of it because you're going to present moment it. You're going to be a conscious wait. When you relive your story of an alcoholic parent beating you and you're not present awake, you're in it. You're at the effect of it. You're reliving it in it. And so, yes, it's reprogramming you over and over again. But if you bring it up, but you're consciously bringing it up and you're choosing to present moment it, there's a second part of you, the witness is there, and now you're not at the effect of it. Yes, you are experiencing it, which is excellent from a solution-focused experience, because you can't change it unless you make it vulnerable. So you want to experience it, but you're only experiencing it momentarily so you can add the choose again. Notice, accepting what is, you're experiencing it. During the experience with it, you get present, and the suffering stops, you get present with it. And now you're not the effect of it. And if that's all you do, that's great. And then you can add the choose again, where you elicit gratitude or how do you want to feel. So some of you might have heard before we went on lunch, I worked with one of my friends on our group today. And you might have noticed that she said she's anxious. And before I just started working her anxiety, because it might have come into play, I asked her, how do you want to feel? Remember manifestation GPS? The subconscious needs to know where it's going. And I think she said, I want to feel ease and, can't remember, ease and free, ease and peace and ease. And so, because I know I'm going to do NAC at some point, so it might have, the opportunity might have come up while she's present momenting this and getting present with her anxiety, that if she got that anxiety feeling from a 10 down to a 1, there's that right there. My clients are like, I'm good. Just the fact that I'm not feeling anxious, hallelujah. But now they're in that present moment and they got it to a 1. Now I'm like, how do you want to feel? Do you want to bring up that feeling of ease and peace now? Because now you're in that alpha and now you have the opportunity to choose how you feel. Why don't you choose how you want to feel? Because that's the whole idea of creating your future is rehearsing it. The piano player, you have to rehearse it. The mirror neurons, if you can't experience it, you can't make it happen on the inside, you're not going to get it on the outside. Because nothing in this world has ever existed that wasn't first a thought. And so if you want to practice eliciting this on a regular basis, and if you do the Joe Dispenza work or his meditations, doesn't he get you into that place of bringing up the positive emotions? Well, that's you rehearsing. Mirror neurons are firing, you're rehearsing it. And therefore, there's more chance it's going to happen in the real world because you've practiced what that's going to feel like. And tomorrow, when we do the health module and the relationship module, especially the health module, I'll have a little piece on fertility, how I work it a bit with my fertility patients as well. I will remind you of this, and then we're going to call it a day, and then we'll start again tomorrow. Be playful is what Bill Bankson says. When you do a Bankson workshop, he gives you a card at the end, and it has 2 sides to it. He goes, here's my manual. He says, I've written this 3-day workshop, and here's the manual. And one side says, be playful, and the other side, you'll have to do his workshop to find out what it is. But I wanted to share the playful part. And it makes me think of Groundhog Day here with Bill Murray, because Dispenza does something similar. When you finish a meditation at the Joe Dispenza advanced workshops, he usually asks the following after you've done the meditation. And they can be anywhere from an hour to 3 hours long on these guided meditations. He asks you, what did you like most best about your practice? How you handled that situation? Because where the mind goes, the chi follows. What you focus on becomes your reality. So when you come out of a meditation, because you're human, and you're going to go, oh, I could have done this better. I did that. You're going to find all the things you did wrong, because that's what we do, right? That's what we're good at. And we're looking at changing our focus, because what you focus on becomes your reality. So rather than focusing on that one missing tile, let's look at the 999,000 brilliant painted tiles on the ceiling. So you ask yourself, every time you do something, you do one of these tools, ask yourself, what did I like best about how I did this? So that changes the focus. And then the other thing that Dispenza says is, if you had another opportunity, how would you do it differently? Or what would you do differently? And that's the beauty of life, and especially the relationships. You're going to see your kids again. You're going to see your spouse again. And you're going to have so many opportunities to do this. If you're meditating, you get to meditate every day. So this is for the rest of your life. And so you started on the piano, and one day you're going to have a conversation while you're playing the piano. It's going to be so habituated that somebody's going to say something to you. And as they say something, you're feeling yourself be triggered, and you're going into notice. You go into an accepting tool right now. You're getting curious with them. You choose again. And now you are totally not at the effect of what they're saying, like so fast. Okay. Be playful. So this is what I'm inviting you to do, because Bankson says this. Dispenza doesn't say it this way, but that's how I interpret this question, what he states after meditation. And you're going to just keep redoing the stuff. You're going to see the same themes come up. Oh my God. And yeah, just be playful. Be kind to yourself. Your thoughts create your reality. So you become what you believe, and you're getting to choose who you're becoming. That's the idea behind day one. And it is an inside job. So the tree of life, and what you've heard before, as beloved, so below. And so you now are aware that you get to do the work inside. You don't have to wait for the presidents to change. You don't have to wait for COVID to go away. You don't have to wait for anything in your external environment to change. You get to start right now working on your inner environment. And I gave you some tools. The knowledge, or the value is not in the knowledge, the value is in the application of the knowledge. So you get to apply it. You have to apply it. If you don't practice, so tonight, hopefully you'll do a whole brain, something whole brain, etc. Oh, I like that. Susan said, I heard so beloved, so below. Yes. As beloved, so Arnett said that. As beloved, so below. So I invite you tonight to do a surrender. If something comes up for you, to do a whole brain. Practice the EFT. Don't wait. Start doing this. Heal your mind. Your family's at the effect of it. Tomorrow, we're going to get back into mastery manifestations. We're going to go through these tools more. We've gone through clear, transform negative beliefs. That was a big part of today. Now we're going to get into the other steps, and we're also going to practice the manifestation. And we're going to go into, because of popular demand, I work with fertility, and so usually there's a hit on the man in the relationship. So I end up doing a lot of relationship conscious work with my patients, and I love doing it. They say it's beneficial, so I'm going to share it with you guys. Okay, so tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Lorianne, you're going to open up the room 15 minutes before?
Yep, I'll open up the room at the same time, about 8:15. I'll open up the room, and if you guys have any trouble, just email hello@healthyseminars.com, and I'll send out the email an hour beforehand just so you guys have it at the top of your emails.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, and I did in the chat, everyone, I did put a couple downloads in there. So one is the tapping points that Lauren had up. And then there's another one. There's a couple of resources we put up as well.
And I'll stick around for 10 minutes for questions if people have any questions. And the rest of you guys can take off. And we'll get back at this tomorrow.